You are still keeping it locked right here on your Feel Good Breakfast Show. Now, stories are not only inspire, but also introduce children to worlds, concepts and images far beyond their imagination. From astronauts to super inventors, friendship, acts of kindness and magic. Through stories, children can see and believe in new possibilities. That's why Cadbury Dairy Milk wants everyone to help inspire our orphaned and vulnerable children by sharing an inspirational story. Now, these children have had a harder time during lockdown than we could ever imagine.
Yeah, and they, of course, have less access to volunteers and to caregivers, which is why they all need that stimulation and inspiration in all of it as much as they can get. So, Lebohang Masango, award-winning author of children's book Mpumi's Magic Beads, and junior category brand manager Thabang Modiba, join us to chat more about this new and exciting initiative and how you can share your story, because there really is a story in everyone, whether fact or fiction. Lebohang, Thabang, a very good morning to both of you.
Good morning. Hi.
Good morning, team.
Thabang, let me start off with you first. Talk to us about the Glass and a Half project presents There's a Story in Everyone. Why was this initiative launched?
There are millions of orphan and vulnerable children across South Africa, and many of which have limited access to stimulation and they have limited access to inspiration. So given that, I think now more than ever, they really need our help, As you know, we launched the Glass and a Half project, whereby we called upon South Africans to give the precious gift of childhood. And by simply purchasing a specially wrapped bar, you helped contribute towards R1 million worth of educational toys, books, and games for orphan and vulnerable children. So what we've done now is that we've taken it a step further with Glass and a Half presents There's a Story in Everyone. And basically what we're doing now is that we're calling upon South Africans just to be generous and share their stories, especially in this time.
This is so amazing. For you, Lebohang, as an author, how exciting is it to hear about an initiative like this one that's encouraging others to write inspirational stories, and what inspired you to write stories for children and to just share your experiences with the rest of South Africa?
Well, I'm really excited that this campaign has been launched because I think it's wonderful to get all South Africans to remember that while we're busy with lockdown, while we're concerned for our health and the health of our loved ones, it's important to spare a thought for orphaned and vulnerable children and to spare a thought of the ways that this has affected them. And so I love that we are all being called upon not just to buy the specially wrapped Cadbury Dairy Milk bars, but to also contribute stories that will be later compiled and shared with them. So I think that's wonderful. And what inspired me to write my story and to become a writer is that, we grow up with stories, we grow up with grandmoms who tell stories, moms, dads, uncles. Stories really fill our lives. And I just wanted to become one of the people who would contribute positively to children's childhoods in ways that are memorable and exciting. And I'm so happy that we're calling upon everyone to engage in this, because it really is fun and it's going to be special for all the children who receive these stories in the end.
Yeah, and I'm glad that this initiative actually does call on everyone, because it's an opportunity for those stories to be documented and to possibly never be lost ever again. So, Thabang, clearly you don't have to be an experienced writer to share your story, but it can be kind of one of those very fearful things. You don't know where to start. How do we start?
So basically, we believe that there's a story in everyone. So what we're going to be doing over the next 2 weeks, we'll be sharing tips from expert storytellers who will help South Africans carve out their stories. And then from there on, what we'll do is that we'll showcase how anyone and everyone can actually share their stories, So we encourage people to please stay tuned onto our social media platforms, as well as our Cadbury website, in terms of how we'll be showing how everyone can share their stories and inspire orphan and vulnerable children, especially in this time.
Fiction or real life, it doesn't matter. This is exciting stuff, right?
Lebohang, maybe you can add on to that, what impact has your stories had on children in South Africa, and maybe share some wisdom for people that are maybe afraid to start, but want to start. How do they then get rid of this fear?
Well, I think my story has impacted little girls to really, really just love themselves and love their hair. My favorite anecdote from my actual story is that there has been a school that's actually added beads to their school hair policy because one of the little girls who loved my story actually added beads to her hair. And while it wasn't allowed at the time, her parent and the school were able to sit down and work it out. And they realized that there's no actual reason why children shouldn't wear beads in their hair if that's what makes them feel happy and confident and beautiful. So that's my favorite thing that happened from my story, Mpumi's Magic Beads. And in terms of sharing your stories, you know, the wonderful thing about stories is that they don't just start with writing. You know, a story can start from a conversation you have with someone. You can see something happening, perhaps on television, perhaps in the streets. And a story doesn't always have to be written down. You can record a voice note. You can write a picture, you can paint something, you can make something out of clay. So while we're inspiring everyone and telling everyone that there is a story in everyone, I want everyone to think really big. You don't have to confine yourself to the page. You can make a story out of anything. Yeah.
That's amazing. And, you know, to think that one of your stories has had such a massive impact on such a crucial cultural issue, you know, the issue of hair and identity and legacy as well is so, so important. I want to ask you a little bit further about, you know, being a storyteller that inspires young children. How has that helped you continue writing more stories? And has it indeed?
It has. I actually came out with the follow-up to Mpumi's Magic Beads just the other day, where the story follows and Mpumi meets a little boy who's deaf, and they learn to communicate with each other because, you know, when it comes to childhood, there is no barrier to forming friendships, and the story follows their adventures.
I love that. Thabang, you touched on it briefly, but I want you to expand a bit more on it. How can the public get involved to share their stories, and how will the stories be shared with our orphaned and our vulnerable children during this time?
So basically, what we'll be doing is that over the next 2 weeks, we'll be reaching out to experts in order to help us and help South Africans carve out and really be able to tell their stories, you know. And thereafter, what we'll be doing is that on our social media pages, as well as our Cadbury website, we'll be showing more details in terms of how people can actually share their stories, you know. And once people have shared their stories, what we'll then do is that we'll be illustrating as well as compiling all these most inspiring and appropriate stories for children. We'll be compiling them into an ebook for orphan and vulnerable children to actually enjoy. And we'll be sharing it with our beneficiaries. And in addition to this, we'll be having it on our Cadbury website for everyone to actually enjoy.
This is wonderful news. And I tell you, this has inspired me a little bit. Lebohang, I know that you've written Mpumi's Magic Beads, which is amazing. But I want to plant a seed. Try this title, Katleho's Incredible Calabash.
Yeah.
I think you should write something about that.
And I love the alliteration as well. I love it. Great title.
That's what I'm saying.
He's gonna take royalties from that.
None of that. None of that. This is just beautiful, inspirational. But thanks to the two of you for the chat this morning. Much appreciated. Have a great day.
Thanks for having us.
So there you have it. Start getting creative. Over the next 2 weeks, Cadbury Dairy Milk will share tips from expert storytellers to help you discover your inspirational story, whether fictional or based on real life.
Now, we hope you share your story and help inspire our orphaned and vulnerable children. Follow the Cadbury Dairy Milk Glass and a Half Project presents There's a Story in Everyone conversation at www.cadbury.co.za/generosity or on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram using the hashtags Glass and a Half and There's a Story in Everyone. Now, they'll be sharing details on how you can share your story in the coming weeks.